card with his name, a middle initial, as well as a photograph, a driver's license issued by the state of North Carolina, a Department of Veterans Affairs card with a photograph as well as his name. And then within the wallet itself, there are various membership cards with his name, as well as additional personal use cards.
United States has nothing further. Thank you, Agent Director.
Witness, please. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Agent Jarecki.
Good morning.
I just have a few questions for you to clarify some stuff. When you were looking throughout the car and you're seeing the suspected blood spots, were they large blood spots that you suspected or just smaller ones that you took samples of?
They were of various sizes, but I did not take samples of the stains. I did. Okay.
Wait, yeah, let me back up because I messed that up. When you saw something that you suspected to be a blood stain or some kind of bodily fluid, you did a presumptive test first, correct?
No, not on the vehicle itself.
Okay, well, just when you saw something that you suspected to be blood, what did you do?
It was photographed, and then a scaled sticker was placed nearby in order to show size, and then another photograph was taken as well.
Okay, so you didn't do any of the presumptive testing or anything like that?
Not on the vehicle itself.
Not on the vehicle itself. And nothing on the blood spots either? Or the suspected blood spots that were inside the vehicle?
Inside the vehicle, no.
Okay. And how about on the outside of the vehicle?
Outside, no.
Okay. And so you basically were there to take pictures and, I guess, categorize the things that you had found in the trash can and just document that process?
Document as I observed it on scene.
As you observed it on the scene. When you said you saw a suspected bone fragment, you didn't pick that up or do anything with that, correct?
I might have picked it up to examine it, but I don't remember if I picked it up or not.
Okay. Did you take the picture of it before or after you picked it up?
All photographs are taken before any form of touching, moving, or manipulation of evidence.
And that's why you kind of take before and after pictures saying, this is the position that it was in when I see it, I open it up, this is what I see, and then another step saying, well, this is after I opened it. That's what you typically do in your pictures. When you said you discovered the wallet of Mr. Jose Perez, and then it had some stained, a blood stain on it, or something you suspected to be blood on it. There were also other items right inside that trash can with blood on it, correct?
Correct, I believe so.
So you don't know if it could have been transferred from the other items there. There's no way for you to tell how the blood got on his wallet.
I have no idea how it got on the wallet.
Agent Jarecki, I guess, and the same thing with I guess we call it the zap stick or the stun gun. You'd have no idea if that blood got on the zap stick out in the world or it got it on the zap stick after it was placed inside the trash can.
I have no idea, no.
And I believe you had told Ms. Freeman when, did you put the knife box and the stun gun in the same box or container for transportation for further analysis?
They were packaged together on scene and then had been divided in the lab.
Okay. So when they were packaged together, were they in separate bags or anything like that?
No, they were not.
So stuff could have been cross-contaminated just from putting those two items together in the same bag before you sent them off for further analysis?
They could have, yes.
And do you still have State's Exhibit 3 up there? It's the big stack of pictures.
No, I do not.
Your Honor, may I approach with that after I grab it from Madam Clerk? Can you go to, which would be 3-70? And you're on that picture now?
Yes, number 70?
Yes.
Wait, if you have a question, wait till everything's over and get it to the sheriff, and I'll take it up with the lawyers. May or may not be appropriate to get an answer or to respond to you. There are a lot of times reasons things aren't asked. So don't worry about those. If you've got something, just give it to the sheriff. I'll give you the opportunity.
So
You can retrieve that now. That way.
Yes.
are you good for me to go? Thank you, Your Honor. So you're looking at 3-70 now,
Yes, I am.
and that was correct me if I'm wrong, was a picture of the trash can. I think the description you gave was a picture of the knife box specifically, correct?
Correct, yes.
Do you also, to the right of that knife box, do you see a cup or some kind of drinking container?
Yes.
And where is that cup from?
It's from Sheets.
During your investigation and I guess observations, did you ever pick up that cup and look inside it or do any kind of test on that cup?
Not that I can recall.
No further question, Your Honor.
Good, right?
Briefly, Your Honor, Agent Jarecki, I think you testified during direct examination about why you did not process or apply any presumptive tests to the vehicle. If you would just explain to us again what the process was for processing the vehicle.
I was requested to photograph the vehicle in scene as is, as observed, and it was decided to be transferred to our secured facility for a detailed examination, search, and testing of any evidence that was found on the vehicle in our controlled building with our access to all of our chemicals, equipment, and such.
And so the blood, in terms of any blood that you did test yourself, what was that?
I did do a presumptive test on the small stain that was observed on the concrete floor that was to the left of the driver door, and that test had come back positive for a presumptive test.
I may approach. Agent Jarecki, if you would please identify for the court what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 30.
It is listed as my item number 28 with an evidence description of one swab of DNA from the garage floor with corresponding case number from CCBI as well as the sheriff's office, the date, offense type, victim is Jose Perez, and the address and agent as well.
And if you know, what happened with that after you had collected it?
This was, the item had been transferred over to Agent Thompson, and she had, I don't know what she had done after that.
You would go ahead and open that. And are you able to recognize it as being the swab that you took there in the garage that you've testified about?
Yes, it is.
And is it substantially in the same condition it was as when you took it?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, we would ask that State's Exhibit number 30 be admitted.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion like.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
No further question, Your Honor.
Yeah, vote then. Thank you for the statement.
Yes, Sean, I believe this time we call J.D. Williams.
Anything-
I'm sorry, no. No.
Anything further this week?
No, Your Honor.
You should be released from your subpoena.
Yes, Sean.
Thank you, ma'am. And to recall, when
J.D. Williams.
You solemnly swear the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do, sir, swear.
Thank you, sir. Have a seat, please.
Could you state your full name for the court, please?
My name is Deputy Josh Williams.
Pull up the microphone so you can choose those. Your name is,
My name is Deputy Josh Williams.
and where are you employed?
I am a sworn deputy with the Wake County Sheriff's Department. I'm assigned to Special Operations K-9 Unit.
How long have you been with Wake County?
March will be 10 years.
And what kind of education and training did you have to have in order to become a sheriff's deputy?
You have to go through about 6 months of BLET. After BLET, you do approximately 12 to 16 weeks of it's what we call field training. Once you complete that, you're assigned to where the sheriff wants you to be.
And what's the field training?
Field training is you are assigned to two different field training officers, your primary and your secondary. Your primary, they help you basically do all the tasks that you are assigned to do in your field training manual. Those tasks range from very different, from a DWI stop to domestics to anything that you would encounter on your own.
And before you came to the sheriff's department, where did you go to school?
I did not go to school, ma'am. If you're referring to college, I attended Harnett County. I went to Harnett Central High School. After the Harnett County High School, I went to the United States Marine Corps. I was assigned in the United States Marine Corps as a military police officer from 2000 to 2004.
And while you were in the Marine Corps, did you get any kind of specialized training in order to become an MP?
Yes, ma'am, I did. As well as becoming an MP in the Marine Corps, you have to go through another basic law enforcement training academy. That was stationed in Fort Leonard, Missouri. That course was approximately 4 months.
And how long were you an MP in the Marine Corps?
I was an MP in the Marine Corps for 4 years.
And when you came out of the Marine Corps, did you go directly to the sheriff's department?
No, I did not. There was about a year to a year and a half gap before I could attend the next academy for the sheriff's department.
And is that because they only started on certain dates?
Correct.
Now, you said that you are now assigned to the K-9 unit, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
And has that always been your job with the Wake County Sheriff's Department?
No, it is not. I was assigned to the courthouse as a courtroom deputy for 2.5 years. After leaving the courthouse, I was assigned to patrol for approximately 2 years and 4 months. It was that time I left patrol and was assigned to K-9.
And was that at your request, or was that asked of you?
Partially both. You have to show an interest in K-9. You have to be a little bit proactive. You have to want to, you have to want to be on the unit. Help them train, help them do anything they want to do. Basically show an interest, be proactive about it.
And you work with a single K-9 now, or more than one?
I work with one single K-9. He is a multi-purpose K-9. He is trained in a variety of different things.
And what's your K-9's name?
My K-9 partner's name is Zen, spelled Z-E-N.
And what kind of dog is he?
He is a German Shepherd. He's from Czechoslovakia. His passport said he was born August the 5th of 2010.
Now, in order for you and a dog to work together as partners in law enforcement, do you and the dog both have to go through some kind of training?
Yes, we do. We approximately go through anywhere between 4 to 6 months of training. With Zen, he was a brand new dog, what we call a green dog. Myself being a brand new handler, not knowing anything other than helping out the previous K-9 handlers. We went through we started October the 2nd and we finished our certification process about the middle of April the following year in 2012.
And can you describe briefly what kinds of things that you have to do to train both yourself and your dog?
You will hear the person training you. It's all about timing. As soon as your dog comes in odor on different things, your dog is trained, and we have the 5 odors of narcotics: marijuana, cocaine, crack cocaine, heroin, and meth. You are also trained in basically article searches. Anything that you have to search in a wooded area, a field, a parking lot, or anything, you send your dog off, and your dog has to sit on that article, as well as tracking. You track your suspects. You track people who walk off from with Alzheimer's, lost children, that as well. We also do building searches. You send your canine into a building. More than likely, if the person has been sitting in the area or in that certain room for an extended period of time, he or she puts off their odor. And so that's what the dog is searching for, that human odor. Same way with tracking, same way with articles. Your dog is also trained in apprehension work, bite work, what everybody calls it. It's a lot of different training, different aspects for your canine you and yourself to go through. It takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of effort.
And is there some incentive that you use for your dog during the course of training, as well as when you're working with your dog in, for example, an article search or a tracking?
Yes, ma'am. When you're tracking, depending on at the end of the track what you want how the suspect or the person reacts to you. If it's an Alzheimer's patient or a lost child, or you need somebody that's walked off you, it's what we call it a Kong. It's a red, basically a ball, and the dog, that's what he is actually working for. He wants his reward, which is that ball. Same way with he's working with drugs. When he's looking for drugs, in his mind, he's looking for his ball, because you implement it in training that's what I'm looking for. So when your canine comes in odor and he gives you that alert, you pay him with your ball. However, when you do an article search, you don't want him biting at it, you don't want him scratching at it. When he comes into that odor, he's going to sit. You want him to sit because we don't want the dog to pick up a gun. We don't want him to pick up a knife. We don't want him to pick up anything that could injure our canine. So he may put his nose on it just to get that final scent, and then sit. And he'll look at it, he'll look back at me, and I'll walk up and verify it, and I'll pay him with his ball, his Kong, and pull him out of the area.
And is there some system by which your canine partner has to qualify in order to be able to do what he does?
Yes, ma'am, he does. Every year we are certified. We have to go through a certification process. It's not an 80% pass and a 20% fail. It's pass or fail. If you don't pass, you don't work.
And is your canine partner then qualified?
Yes, ma'am, he is.
And you said that it's sort of a multi-purpose dog, that he can do article searches, he can sniff for 5 different kinds of controlled substances, he can do tracking. Anything else?
He does narcotics, apprehension, building search, area agilities.
June 16th. What time did you come on that day?
I check on day shift at 07.
And at some point around 7 o'clock that morning, did you get a call to report with your canine partner to an area near the intersection of Old Bayleaf Road and Durham Road, or 98?
I did. I think I received a call approximately 09:15.
And did you and Zen respond to that? When you got there, what did you see?
I think CCBI was in the middle of their processing the scene. I'm not sure of what deputies were still there. I spoke with Sergeant Lilliquist.
And was the body of Mr. Perez still on site?
Yes.
And did you get any information from Sergeant Lilliquist about what they knew about the area, and were you asked to do anything based on that?
I was instructed to basically perform an article search. It looked to be a wooded area. He asked if I would deploy my canine partner and basically work my grid.
And when you say work a grid, what are you talking about?
Based on the wind, you pick out an area you grid off. I chose my grid. I worked about 50 to 75 yards down from Mr. Perez, and I worked about 100 yards into the woods. Based on the wind, I actually had to go down that 100 yards and then start my grid back toward Mr. Perez. Due to the wind, you work perpendicular with the scene using the wind. The canine uses the wind to his advantage. He's basically using that wind to pinpoint that article, if anywhere out there.
And you were making motions with your hand going back and forth. When you work a grid, are you talking about walking your dog or sending your dog on a pass so that they go all the way down one way and then back another and back again and back and forth across the area where you're searching for any articles?
That is correct. Your canine is working off lead in front of you, and you're basically just watching him work. He'll work. He may go off and try to find something, figure out something, and he'll come right back to working his grid. He's done it so much he kind of knows the drill. So we'd work all the way to end our grid, which would be that about 50 to 75 yard grid, and then we'd come back and we just keep working perpendicular all the way back to the scene.
Was it a hot day, the 16th of June?
It was a very hot day.
And because of that, did you have to take breaks occasionally for yourself and especially for Zen?
Yes, ma'am. We would take a break. I would pull my canine out of my search grid because I do not want to contaminate it any further. So therefore, I'd mark it with either a marking with like of orange tape where I knew I'd stop, or place my hat. I'd pull my canine out of my search grid. I'd down him in the shade, let him take a break. You've got to keep your dog motivated a little bit, so therefore I'd take him out of my grid area. I'd throw my set of keys or anything and let him find it and pay him just so he can keep his motivation going, and then go right back into my search grid.
And was there anything that you had to do to prepare Zen to do the article search that you were doing?
It's all about commands with your canine. Different what you want to do with your canine. It's how you tell them what to do. So in this instance, all you got to do is just say, search it out, find it.
And you indicated that you went in about 100 yards in one direction, about 75 yards in another direction.
Yes, ma'am.
Was that all on the side of the street where Mr. Perez's body had been found?
Yes, ma'am. I basically worked 75 yards down, 100 yards, basically toward Durham, not toward Wake Forest.
And so the area that you were doing the grid search with Zen exceeded the area of the crime scene tape, is that correct?
Yes, it did.
And so how long was it after you got there with Zen that you started your search?
I think the brief from Sergeant Lilliquist maybe took 2 to 3 minutes, and soon after I deployed my canine.
And tell us what happened, what you did and what happened.
Like I said before, I basically chose my grid 50 to 75 yards down and 100 yards down in the woods. Along the way, you just kind of pumping your dog up, getting him excited to search. As we set off, he started his search. It was either 2 or 3 times I pulled him out, downed him, put him in a down to give him a break, as well as soon as we got done with a break, threw an article where he wouldn't see out of my grid, out of my search area. And like I was saying before, basically get him excited a little bit more. He's found something. He's got his Kong. He's got his reward. So you send him back off. I think we were searching for approximately 45 minutes to an hour. As we were getting closer and closer to the scene, I want to say approximately 75 feet from the road, 75 feet to 100 feet to the road. He gave an alert, it's what I was stating earlier, that he came into a sit. Thinking that he was a little tired, I kind of walked up nonchalantly and looked, and he kind of gave me that look like, I found something. So I walk up and I look and I see what appeared to be a knife sticking straight into the ground. I quickly paid him with his Kong and pulled him out of that area. I think I downed him maybe 5 to 10 yards away from the article that he had found, and then that's when I called Investigator Weaver.
Did you touch the knife in any way or move it?
No, ma'am, I did not.
And did Investigator Weaver call in CCBI to document where the knife was?
Is when I called Investigator Weaver, her and the sheriff, and I think as well as CCBI were standing in close proximity to the scene. I just didn't want to yell out, so I utilized my phone, and she directed CCBI to me where they took over.
You didn't stop once Zen found the knife, did you?
No, ma'am, I did not. At the direction of the sheriff, I actually extended my grid a little bit further and finished my grid search. I did not find any other articles. I kept my canine away from, I think it was a shoe that was in close proximity, so I kept him away from that because I could visually see that, and I think that already been documented.
And so when you extended your search past your original grid at the request of the Sheriff's Department, about how much further did you go out from your original area?
I think I extended it another 25 to 30 yards at the direction of the sheriff.
And you didn't search across the other side of the road from where the body was, did you?
I did not. We work in teams, and my other canine partner, Deputy Wall, he actually searched the other side of the wall, Old Bay Leaf, which would be the Wake Forest side. He stated that he did not find any articles.
And how long was he out with his dog?
Approximately the same time I was.
And what's his dog's name?
Yeah, his canine is named Rico.
And after you had searched an area that was approximately 130 yards by 75 yards, is that fair?
The opposite way, ma'am. It was still about 100 yards deep, but I extended it to, it would basically been about 100 by 100 now since the sheriff extended it for me.
After you completed searching that area, were you asked to do anything else with your canine partner?
At the time, no, I was not.
Were you asked ever to return to the scene?
No, I was not.
And did you have anything further to do with this investigation other than the article search that you and Zen did on the 16th?
No, ma'am.
I have no other questions.
Witness with it.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Deputy Williams.
Good morning, sir.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but from what you said, it sounds like you start your dog out further and then work its way in closer to the body. Is that a correct
That is
way to put
correct.
it?
I'm sorry. That is correct. Based on the wind, had the wind been pushing the other way, I would have had to start on the other side.
Okay. And you said you had your dog, like how many minutes do you work your dog before you gave him a brief break?
We typically try to work our dogs 20 to 30 minutes. It's a very hot day, and you just have to judge your own dog. You have to be, when he tells you he needs a break, he needs a break.
And when your dog is out there looking for an article, how does it know what it's looking for? Is it just looking for something different in the area, or like a different, like how does it know like what it's going to sit on?
He is basically looking for any inanimate object that does not belong. He's also looking for an article that maybe have human odor. Once he finds that article, like I was saying, he's gonna alert on it by sitting.
And that's what we assume happened here. He found an article with a human odor that is in the forest somewhere, and that's when he sits down and waits till you notice him alerting to you.
That's exactly what happened. He found what he was supposed to, and he sat.
And while he is searching, what are you typically doing?
I typically give him the space he needs. I'm typically walking behind him about 5 to 10 yards, making sure he's still working the grid like he's supposed to. Once he comes into odor, you will see him kind of, with my canine, his tail will come straight out. You know he is in odor, and once he finds it, he always gives me that little quick look back, like, hey, here it is, and he'll sit.
And you kind of know your dog's ticks and characteristics at this point, where you know if he's on to something.
That is correct.
And you said when I guess you had been working about 45 minutes. He had already had a couple of breaks, and you're working your way back towards the road, Old Bayleaf Road, correct?
That is correct.
And that's when he alerted to something and sat down on it, and that ended up being a knife sticking straight up out of the ground.
That is correct.
And were you able to observe anything about the knife, or is that even your job to do, or do you just are alerting the next detective or the person in charge of that, and they take it from there?
From what I saw, it was basically sticking straight into the ground. It looked red and black and silver in color. I didn't really pay much attention to it. I was just concentrating on getting my canine away from it. So therefore, I quickly paid him and got out and called the investigators.
And you said that was about you said about 75 feet from the road. Was it from the road or from the body, 75 feet, the object that you found, the knife that you found?
I would say my guesstimation was about 75 to 100 yards. To get an approximate measurement, I would ask CCBI.
I think you had said 75 feet you just said yards then, so you mean 75, the object 75 feet from the road or body.
If I said yards, I apologize. I meant feet.
Okay. Just kind of describe the area that the dog was searching. How dense is it? How wooded is it? Was it easy to navigate back there?
It's your typical woods. It wasn't overly grown with briars or anything. You could walk pretty easily in it. Once you got closer to the road, I think there was if I remember correctly, a briar patch to the left. But as I was working my grid, it wasn't too dense. It was just very easy to walk through.
Okay. You didn't need a machete or anything like that to get through and do your search?
No, sir.
All right. No further questions, Your Honor.
Correct.
Just two questions. Officer Williams, the grid area that you talked about walking with the dog was 100 yards by 100 yards, correct?
That is correct, ma'am.
And the knife was found 75 to 100 feet from the body, is that correct?
That is correct. Like I said, I would check with CCBI to get the correct measurement.
I have no other questions.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. You can stand there.
Yes, sir,
Any
Your Honor.
Excuse me.
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
No, Your Honor. Thank you, Deputy.
Brother Evans, have to stay.
Yes, Your Honor, the state would call Catherine Thompson Lowder to the stand. worked there for City County Bureau of Identification. That's what we've been calling CCBI, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I've been employed with CCBI since August of 2012.
And tell us a little bit about your background prior to 2012. What type of work did you do?
I worked for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations in a DNA unit. We also covered 34 counties where we would assist those counties with homicide investigations.
And how many years did you work there?
A little over 2 years.
Tell us a little bit about your educational background.
I have a Bachelor of Science from the University of Wilmington in North Carolina in biology. I also have a Bachelor of Arts in Criminal Justice with a minor in Sociology from UNCW. I then graduated with my master's degree in Criminal Justice and Criminology.
And you said that you work for CCBI. What exactly do you do for them?
Similar to Agent Jarecki, I'm a crime scene agent, so when local law enforcement within Wake County requests us to help assist with crime scenes, I respond, document, preserve, and collect evidence.
So in addition to your formal education, what education or training have you had specific to crime scene investigations?
I've had over 300 hours of various forensic classes, including crime scene, photography, latent evidence, and death investigation.
And do you hold any certifications as a crime scene investigator?
I do. I am one of approximately 50 in the state of North Carolina and one of approximately 850 in the United States to hold a crime scene level 1 investigator from the International Association of Identification.
I believe we heard a little bit yesterday about the International Association of Identification, but just briefly, if you'd remind us what that is.
It's just an organization where we can become certified in where they certify various fields of study, including latent evidence, crime scene investigation. They set a standard for how many hours of training I have to have, as well as how many years of experience I have to have in order to qualify for these.
And how many hours of training is that you have to be a level 1?
For a level 1, I believe it's 48.
And 48 hours over the course of your...
5 years.
And how many crime scenes approximately have you processed during your career?
With CCBI, I've processed between 1,200 and 1,500 crime scenes.
And how many of those, or how many during your career, including your time in Tennessee, were homicide crime scenes?
At Tennessee, I processed 12 homicides, and here at here at CCBI, I've processed about 15, so a total of 27.
Let's talk just for a minute about kind of the overall process of crime scene investigation and the way that CCBI might approach a particular crime that has occurred.
Okay.
Tell me, we've heard already today from Agent Jarecki. Typically, how many different agents might be involved, or are there situations where different agents might be involved in a crime scene investigation or as part of a crime investigation?
In larger cases, it depends on our work schedule. We work rotating shifts, nights and weekends, so one person cannot be in charge of everything that happens on a 24-hour basis. So it's often when investigations lead into multiple days that other agents are involved in crime scenes in one particular case.
And how do y'all work together a case? How do you communicate about a case? And if someone collects something at a scene, how is that shared between agents?
Oftentimes we're able to overlap with one another, so we'll have one-on-one communication. We always send emails, phone calls to one another. And if evidence is collected and I'm the primary, often the evidence will be placed in my secured evidence locker by our evidence technician. So the evidence stays in one person's hands.
And tell us a little bit more about that secure evidence locker and your evidence technician. Is that located there at CCBI?
It is. It's located at 3301 Hammond Road, which is our office. It's in a secured facility. In order to gain access to our evidence room, you have to have a badge, and then you also have, it's a biometric system with our fingerprint. So only limited people have access to those. Our evidence technician does have a key as to where she can have access to the lockers.
So if I'm an agent and I've been to a scene and collected items at a scene, such as Agent Jarecki did in this case, and am bringing them back for processing, walk us through kind of what happens with those.
Agent Jarecki would bring the evidence back to CCBI, and then she would have to either meet with me to where I have access to my evidence locker, or our evidence technician in order to gain access to my locker.
And so is it possible that an agent might collect items at a scene and another agent might be involved in the actual processing of those items?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about when we say processing items, what that means. But you mentioned that when you worked in Tennessee that you worked as part of a DNA forensic unit.
Yes.
Is there a DNA forensic unit at CCBI?
No, there isn't.
Okay, and so when there is DNA forensic evidence to be examined or tested, talk me through what that process is for y'all.
When we collect DNA evidence or any type of serology evidence, it's submitted to the state lab for further testing. We just do the preliminary testing at CCBI, and then it is sent to be further analyzed by the state lab.
And so it's possible that from the time an item is collected all the way through when it's finally tested and a report provided back by SBI, that item has moved from one agent within your CCBI agency to another, and then on to the SBI lab.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And we've heard a lot during the course already of this trial about some of the labeling that is on items. Can you talk a little bit about how y'all document when things move between agents and maybe between agencies?
Sure. On every piece of evidence that we collect, on the exterior packaging, we always write the CCBI case number, a victim's name, the location, the date, the type of crime that it is, as well as whoever collected that initials or their markings. That agent then seals the package and initials it as well. We also keep a chain of custody, so we know whose hands are on it at all times or where the piece of evidence is at all times. If I place a piece of evidence in someone else's locker, I have to sign it over to a specific locker, so we know exactly where that evidence is at all times.
When you reference a chain of custody, is that a log basically that sets forth?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is that maintained as part of y'all's everyday business and
Yes.
as pertains to these items? You've referenced an evidence tech. Who is the evidence tech and kind of what are their responsibilities?
Our evidence tech is Anita Smith. Her responsibilities are she receives evidence from various agencies that need to be processed within our lab, such as fingerprint evidence from various law enforcement agencies within Wake County.
And you mentioned, of course, that in order to have DNA forensic analysis done, that these items then have to be sent to the state crime lab. Who is responsible for transporting them to the state crime lab?
Either someone from the SBI will come get them or Anita will take them to the SBI.
Were you on duty and were you employed and on duty on the early morning hours of Sunday, June 16th, 2013?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And were you called out to a crime scene that day?
Yes, I was.
And what time was that you first received that call?
I was dispatched to the call at approximately 7:29 a.m.
And what time did you arrive at the scene?
At approximately 8:12 in the morning.
And where exactly was it that you were called to?
I was called to the intersection of Durham Road and Old Bay Leaf Road. Durham Road is also known as Highway 98.
And when you arrived there, were there other people already on scene?
Yes, there were various members of the Wake County Sheriff's Department there.
And what did you do once you arrived there on scene?
I spoke to Deputy Garvey of the Wake County Sheriff's Department, who just briefed me on the incident.
What were your responsibilities and duties there? What is the purpose of having you called out to the scene?
The Sheriff's Department came across a crime scene and they needed me to document it and collect evidence from it.
And let's talk a little bit about where exactly this crime scene was. If you can, kind of leaving from here, tell us roughly what part of the county it would be in.
It's north towards the Wake Forest area. If you're familiar with the Wake Forest area, 98, I believe, runs east and west. It was on the west portion of 98 towards the Durham area.
And upon arriving at the scene and talking to Deputy Garvey, what did you observe?
Prior to my arrival, the Sheriff's Department had placed a yellow crime scene tape to secure the area, so no one could enter or exit the crime scene without their knowledge. I noticed that after doing a walkthrough, I noticed that there was an unknown male laying in a ditch, as well as some various items throughout the wooded area that were of interest.
You mentioned a wooden area. Describe for us, if you will, kind of what this area was, what the crime scene tape marked off.
The road, Old Bay Leaf Road, was a cul-de-sac, but on the end of it was like a dirt road. In the cul-de-sac, it was a wooded area that surrounded it on all sides, basically.
And when you mentioned the dirt road, describe kind of how the road went into that area.
It was a cul-de-sac that ended, and there was like a dirt path as to where vehicles could go down it, but it was blocked, so the vehicles could not go down it.
What did you do at that point?
After I did my initial walkthrough of the crime scene, I began to document it, and we document through various techniques, and in this one we did overall photographs. I also did what we call a 360 camera, so it gives an entire layout of the scene, and we also videoed.
And what's the purpose for doing that?
To show the scene as it is, prior to any movement.
Tell us, in addition to taking photographs of the scene, what, if anything, you did there at the scene?
After taking photographs, I began to identify various pieces of evidence that were of interest to us. In the road, there were 3 areas of what appeared to be suspected blood. Those were noted with evidence markers. Off on the wood line, there was a pair of shoes. Those were also noted with evidence markers. And a knife was found, which was also noted with an evidence marker. I then measured those from various reference points on the road and made a sketch.
And you've mentioned that there was an unknown male there laying in the ditch. Tell us what you did as pertains to the victim in this case.
Overall photographs were taken of the body as is. I then examined the deceased.
And how far off of the road was the body located?
I would say approximately 2 to 4 feet.
In examining the deceased, walk us through exactly what you did.
When I examine them, I palpitate their head to see if I can find any possible injuries, which I did not.
Describe what you mean when you say you palpitate the head.
I took my hands and ran it through his head, or his hair, to see if there was anything that I could not see with my eye, but I could feel with my hands. I then examined, he was face down, so I examined his back first. There were multiple of what I believe to be possible puncture or linear marks on his back that appeared to be possible stab wounds.
When you say multiple, were you able to identify the number?
No.
Okay. What else did you observe?
The deceased was laying face down in the ditch. His hands were underneath of his chest like this, and his shirt was pulled up over his head.
And what kind of shirt was he wearing?
It appeared to be like a cotton t-shirt that was sleeveless.
And what else was he wearing?
A pair of khaki and colored pants. On the pants I noticed an unknown impression that was of interest as well.
Did you notice anything else about him while you had him in that position?
Not on his back at that time.
What did you do next?
I then rolled him over so I could examine the front of his body.
And in rolling him over, what did you observe?
A term that we use called rigor mortis, which is the tightening of muscles. So basically, it occurs shortly after death. He was in full rigor, which means that I could not open his hands very well because his muscles were tight. There was also a small amount of liver mortis, which is blood pooling around the front waistband. That typically happens shortly after death. It's a purple coloring. And there were several small puncture wounds, again, on the front area of his chest, shoulders, and a very large, what appeared to be a laceration on his neck.
If you could describe that laceration on his neck, the depth, and what you observed about it.
It appeared to be relatively deep, in several inches long.
What, if any, other things did you notice about him at that point?
I believe he had a wedding band on, as well as a yellow veteran's bracelet, or support your troops, something similar to that on his wrist.
You mentioned that liver mortis and rigor mortis had set in, and tell us a little bit about that and how long, in your experience, if you know, it takes for those things to occur.
With rigor mortis, it just depends on various circumstances, such as the temperature, but it's within a few hours after death when it begins to sink in. And like I said before, the muscles of the body start to tighten, and it causes joints to be very hard to move. So fingers are a good sign where we always look for rigor mortis. Rigor mortis. And like I said before, it's very difficult to open a finger or their hand when rigor mortis is set in. Liver mortis sets in shortly after death as well, and it's basically the pooling of blood within the body.
And what was, just tell us kind of the conditions on that particular day.
That particular day, it was early in the morning, about 8 o'clock, and it was approximately 70 degrees that morning.
What other things did you do as regard to the victim at that time?
At that time, we did not have identification on the deceased. I then used what we call a rapid identification unit, which is just a handheld computer device that's linked into various fingerprint databases. And I placed the deceased's finger on there to see if we could get a positive identification. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful with that. Since we were unsuccessful, I took what we call a 10 print, or I took all 10 of his fingerprints. And that's done by using an ink pad, and I rolled the deceased's fingerprints on the ink pad and then placed it on a piece of paper, which would then later be analyzed by a latent unit.
And was that, those ink prints later used, and was someone able to make an identification of the decedent?
Yes, they were.
And what was that identification that was made?
It was Jose Perez.
Describe for us a little bit more about, you've talked about liver mortis and rigor mortis. What other physical things occur to a body once somebody's life is ended in regards to their blood and other things that you might know about in your experience?
Well, depending on the types of wounds and things like that is based upon the blood. There was not a lot of liver mortis, particularly in the scene. It did not appear because of the large wound here and where there was so much blood on his shirt. So there was not a big presence of liver mortis. Usually we would see more liver mortis since he was face down throughout his entire chest, but in this case we didn't because he had lost a large amount of blood from this neck wound.
And once you have observed these wounds and you document them, is that correct?
That's correct. I documented them again through photography.
Okay, and then as to what happens with the victim, are you aware of kind of what the next step is regarding that? Were you present when the body was removed from the scene?
Yes, I was. In Wake County, we use a group called WC7. They transport the body to the medical examiner's office for further investigation, and I had requested them, and they arrived on scene, and while I was there, they took the deceased to the medical examiner's office in Raleigh.
Do you know approximately what time it was that they arrived on scene?
I am not exactly sure what time they arrived. Oh, I'm sorry, about 11:07.
And throughout that time, from the time you had arrived, I believe you said you arrived around 8 a.m. Through when they took the body, was that time that was spent documenting scene, observing
Yes, during those
the
three
injuries to the victim?
during those 3 hours, I was doing work on the scene, documenting, examining the victim, and collecting other pieces of evidence as well.
Tell me a little bit, Agent Lauder, if you will, about what precautions you take as a crime scene investigator to ensure that you're not contaminating the scene, especially, for example, when you're taking pictures of or manipulating the body of the decedent.
One of the very first things I do when I get on scene before I've even talked to an officer is I put gloves on. And a lot of times when we examine a body, I actually will double or even triple gloves so I'm not contaminating any pieces of evidence or any other areas.
In addition to what you've described, your work was related to the victim there at the scene. What else did you do at that time at the scene?
I also briefly talked about the various other items that I noted that were of evidence. Those were collected and taken and placed in secured bags or envelopes where they were then taken back to our crime scene lab.
And specifically, what evidence did you collect there?
I collected 3 areas of suspected blood that were on the road. I also collected a left and a right shoe. I collected a knife that was red and black in color handle. I also collected what appeared to be some insect activity off of the deceased.
Can you give us a little bit more explanation about that, if you would?
Again, shortly after death, depending on the conditions of the weather, insect activity will begin to occur within the deceased. It typically happens in wounds or open orifices, so eyes, nose, and also, like I said, wounds. When Mr. Perez was rolled over, there was insect activity on his pants, his shirt, and near the neck wound. So those insects, which I thought were maggots, were collected for later analysis.
You mentioned that you collected a knife there at the scene. How was that knife located?
It was located in the wooded area, and it was sticking out of the ground straight up.
And did you find it yourself, or who located it, if you know?
I believe it was found by a canine unit with the sheriff's department.
Okay. And in collecting that knife, again, what steps do you take to secure that and to maintain the integrity of that item of evidence?
Again, well, the knife was also photographed as is before it was collected and removed from the scene. The knife was then placed in what we call a sharps container, which is basically a plastic container with foam at the bottom, so the blade will never be able to be exposed or harm anyone that's transporting it. It's sealed in that container. The various my markings, such as the CCBI case number, Wake County case number, the date, and my initials, as well as the type of crime, are placed on it. I then seal it shut with a piece of tape, which I initial.
And you mentioned that you collected the knife. Where was the knife?
It was just past, the sheriff's department had placed crime scene tape up in the wooded area as well. It was just past the crime scene tape.
And how far away from the victim's body was it located?
From the victim's body?
Yes.
I would say it was approximately between 50 and 60 feet away.
And how was it when you found it or when you first observed it there on the ground?
The blade was closed. I could see the tip of it at the top of it, but it was face down. It was sticking in the ground.
And You mentioned a few minutes ago that there were shoes that you also collected there at the scene. Can you describe for us what kind of shoes, men's, women's shoes, what they were?
They appeared to be men's shoes. They were white slip-on shoes. And they were located in the wooded area just past the deceased. I would probably say maybe 20 feet away from the deceased. And they were facing various directions. I believe one was facing 98 and one was facing more towards the dead-end road. And what appeared to be blood was located throughout them.
And you've talked about suspected blood spots that you identified there on the road. How far were they from where the body was located?
Probably within 10 to 15 feet.
Okay. And what did you do to collect, when you say you collected those, what is that process?
Those 3 areas were presumptively tested with phenolphthalein, which is a 3-part test. I have taken in order to test them, I take a swab, a sterile swab, I swab the area. I then take the 3 chemicals, the first one which is methanol, place a drop on it. The second chemical is phenolphthalein, I place a drop on that swab. And then hydrogen peroxide. If it reacts with the hemoglobin in blood, it will immediately have a color reaction, and phenolphthalein typically turns pink. In these 3 areas, it had an immediate reaction, which was a presumptive test for blood.
And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but a presumptive test, just tell us what that means.
There are other things that it could react with, so it's not saying that it's definitely human blood, but it's reacting with hemoglobin in some type of blood. So it's a presumptive test because it's not 100% correct. The SBI will then have a confirmatory test to state that it's blood.
Or if I may approach.
Yes, ma'am.
Agent Louder, if you would please identify for us what's been marked as State's Exhibit Number 1. Do you recognize what I've handed to you as State's Exhibit Number 1?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you recognize it?
There are various photographs that I took on scene that day.
Okay, and do they accurately and fairly depict those things to which you've testified, the subject matter of what you observed on that day of June 16th, 2013?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, will they help you? First, let me ask you if they've been altered or deleted in any way.
No, they haven't.
Will they help in the illustration of your testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Your Honor, we would ask that State's Exhibit Number 1 be allowed into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
That's allowed.
Your Honor, we would ask at this time to publish this exhibit to the jury. Yes, Your Honor.
Not with me.
May I approach?
Yes, ma'am.
We would ask the witness be allowed to step in.
And Your Honor, we asked to reposition ourselves.
You certainly may.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if at any time you cannot see an exhibit you think you're supposed to see, do not sit quiet. Let me know. You have to see what you're supposed to see. You cannot hear something you think you're supposed to hear. Let me know right away. You have to hear and see what you're supposed to see and hear. You may continue.
Thank you. If I could, Agent Louder, turn your attention to what's been marked as photograph 1 within State's Exhibit number 1. If you could identify for us what that is.
This was just a photograph of the intersection of Old Bayleaf Road and Durham, just to mark my location.
Okay, and where was this in relation to the crime scene?
It was further north of the crime scene. The crime scene was further south on Old Bayleaf Road.
And roughly how far is the distance of Old Bayleaf Road that it runs from Durham Road down towards what you've described as the dirt road?
I would say maybe a quarter of a mile, a little more than that. Not exactly sure on that distance.
And was it in that stretch between this intersection and where the dirt road is, the crime scene that we've been referring to?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And is this a photograph, what's been marked as number 2 within State's Exhibit number 1, looking down towards that dirt road?
That's correct. The dirt road is, I guess it's not showing up, but the dirt road's down here.
And if you could please identify, what is that underneath the street sign there?
Right here is where the unknown male was located.
And there appears to be in the tree line there some type of yellow tape. What is that?
Yes, this yellow crime scene tape the sheriff's department had placed prior to my arrival to secure the scene.
Okay. And once you arrived there, did you walk the scene?
I did. I actually extended my walk past the yellow tape in the wooded area.
Okay. And if you could please describe for us what photograph number 3 within State's Exhibit number 1 is.
This right here is the sign we just saw on the other photo. The deceased is right here. So I'm standing more in the wood line photographing out.
You can tell a little bit from this photograph, but I think you've testified. How far off the road was the body located?
I would say approximately 2 to 4 feet.
And it appears that there is a dip there, or what some may refer to as a ditch. What is describe a little bit how deep that was. And
I would say that the ditch, it was just like a normal ditch, probably just a couple feet off of the road.
looking at what's been marked as photograph number 4 within State's Exhibit number 1, what is that a photograph of?
This is the photograph of the 2 shoes that were found in the wooded area. And just to put your point into reference, the deceased was located over in this area.
And so, and I think you may have mentioned this before, but how far from the body were the shoes located?
Between 25 and 30 feet, I think.
Okay, and one of those shoes you can pretty clearly see, but the other shoe, would you just point out where exactly that was?
Yes, it's right here. It's under some brush.
It was after, I assume, you had walked the scene and photographed the scene that you then started to do your observations concerning the victim?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that right? If I could turn your attention to what's been marked as number 5 within State's Exhibit number 1. Describe for us what this is.
This is an overall photograph of how the deceased was found on the side of the road.
Okay, and so tell us kind of where exactly you are standing in relation to the road and taking this photograph, if you remember.
I'm standing more on the roadway at this point.
And is this exactly the manner in which you found the decedent on that June 16th, 2013?
Yes, that's correct.
And so in terms of his shirt being pulled up over his head, that was not something you did in terms of documenting any injuries?
No, that was how he was found.
Was there anything that you noticed in the area immediately surrounding the body?
There was some of what appeared to be blood, but that was when we moved him. We noticed it.
I'm sorry, that was,
What appeared to be blood?
If I could turn your attention to what's been marked as photograph number 6 within State's Exhibit number 1.
This is just an overall photograph of the deceased legs.
Okay, and there on his right-hand side above what appears to be kind of his shorts line, what is that?
It appears to be a puncture wound,
Okay, and when you say a puncture wound, what does that mean?
a laceration, or a possible stab wound.
And turning your attention to what's been marked as State's Exhibit, I'm sorry, photograph number 7 within State's Exhibit number 1.
This is just another overall mid-range photo of the deceased's back.
And what is the purpose of taking multiple photos of a victim like this?
Typically in crime scenes, we take what we call an overall photograph, a mid-range, which is similar to this, and then a close-up. So close-ups of specific areas of interest. It's just to help document it.
And I believe in this photograph you can identify what other injuries may have been on his back. If you could just point those out for us.
One here, 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 as well as here. I think there might have been one here.
And you identified those as being,
Again, possible puncture wounds or stab wounds.
and looking at photograph number 8 in State's Exhibit number 1, what does this appear to be?
It's just a close-up of his shirt pulled up over his head, and what appears to be a possible puncture or laceration through his shirt as well.
And did you notice any other possible punctures or lacerations through his shirt?
Yes. When it was examined later, yes.
There in that picture, there appears to be down kind of in the middle. What is that in the middle of the picture along the bottom there on the shirt?
Down here, it's more possible lacerations or puncture wounds through the shirt.
Turning your attention now to what's been marked as photograph number 9 within State's Exhibit number 1. Describe for us what that is.
They removed the shirt from the back of his head. This white stuff right here is what appears to be the insect activity. This right here, upon examination, it appears to be a possible bullet defect on the back of his neck.
When you say bullet defect, what does that mean?
Typically when a bullet goes through an object, you will see a hole, but this is it appears to be a graze. So same type of pattern you would see.
Looking at what's been marked as State's, or photograph number 10 within State's Exhibit number 1, at some point did you roll Mr. Perez over?
Yes, I did. This is when we have rolled Mr. Perez over and he's placed in a body bag. It's an overall photograph.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about, you say a body bag. What is the purpose of that?
It's used for transporting him to the medical examiner's office to keep his body contained and not contaminated.
Okay. And if you could, Agent Louder, just speak a little bit louder.
Sorry.
That's all right. We're hiding here behind the visual aid. But walk us around kind of that picture there, if you will, and some of the things that you observed. There appears to be, for example, something to the left of the body. Could you point out what you found that to be?
This right here is just it appears to be a blood stain from where he was laying face down. And his shirt was down, and like I had said before, his hand was up underneath of his body. The other one was slightly to his side. And there was what appeared to be a large amount of blood on his shirt as well as his pants and down his legs.
And there on his arm that is lying there on his chest, I think you mentioned earlier some items that he had on. What was that, if you remember?
There's a yellow bracelet. I believe it was a support veterans bracelet that he wore.
Turning to what's been marked as photograph number 11 within State's Exhibit number 1.
This is just a close-up photograph of his chest and arm.
Right. And tell us a little bit about the injuries as you observed there on his body once you rolled him over.
When I rolled him over, I noticed a very large laceration up on his neck. And I believe that there were several others on his chest when I moved his shirt as well.
Looking at what's been marked, photograph number 12 in State's Exhibit number 1, can you identify for us the laceration that you are referring to?
Yes, the laceration is here to approximately here.
And did you have opportunity to observe that laceration or that cut?
I did. I took a closer look at it.
And what was the length approximately of that cut?
I would say it was several inches long.
And were you able to make any determination as to the depth
No.
cut? Okay. Turning your attention to what's been marked as number 13 within State's Exhibit 1.
This is another photograph of Mr. Perez's back and the various what are believed to be possible puncture or stab wounds on his back.
And if you would, just by counting each one that you identified, point out.
There's one here, 2, 3, 4, 5.
What, if any, other injuries did you notice on his back or on the backs of his legs?
I didn't notice any injuries on the back of his legs. We had already talked about the possible bullet defect on the back of his neck. I believe that was it on his back.
Turning to what has been marked as photograph number 14 in State's Exhibit 1, and this being back looking at once you had turned the victim over. Again, if you would just point out the wound or the cut that you identified on the front of him.
The laceration is right here on his neck.
And is State's Exhibit number 1, number 15 within State's Exhibit number 1, is that a close-up?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and in being able to obtain that photograph, tell us how you did that.
I just got on plane with the body and made sure my camera was on plane with his wound so we could get a close-up photograph of his wound.
And once you did that, were you able to make any kind of determination either in actual measurement or just by observation as to how deep that wound was?
I didn't take any measurement of how deep the wound was. The medical examiners typically do that.
I think you talked about laying out what you referred to as crime scene markers at the scene.
Yes, that's correct.
Is that correct? And looking at what's been marked as photograph number 16 within State's Exhibit 1,
Yes.
tell us what this is.
This is an overall photograph of the cul-de-sac. You can see some of them right here. So marker B, marker A, and there's another marker over here for D. A, B, and D were used as reference points. I took a GPS coordinates of those locations for measurements. These other items right here, it's 1, 2, and 3. Those were the areas of suspected blood in the roadway.
Okay, and again, just to orient us to the scene here, do you see the victim's body in this picture?
Yes, he's located right there near the sign.
And were there other crime scene markers that you placed out?
There were, I believe it was 4, 5, and 6. 4 and 5 were used for the shoes, and 6 was used for the knife, which is just over here past this crime scene tape.
And in fact, looking at what's been marked as photograph number 17 within State's Exhibit 1, would that reflect the location of the knife?
Yes, it does.
and looking at what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 1, photograph 18.
That's an overall or a close-up photograph of exactly how I found the knife.
Okay, and so it appears there that it is sticking into the ground. Is that the manner in which it was found?
It is. It was sticking down at an angle like this.
Louder, if you'd like, you can take a seat.
Is a cylinder that is containing a silver and colored tip, red and black and colored knife, or, I'm sorry, a red and black and color handle knife.
Okay, and is that, do you recognize that item?
I do. My CCBI case number, the Wake County Sheriff's case number, the date, the type of offense, the victim, the address, and my name, as well as my initials are on here.
If you would please open that item.
What's the number on?
State's Exhibit number 10. You recognize that item?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and what is it and how did you come into possession of it?
This is the knife that was located at the crime scene.
And is it the knife that you collected there at the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it substantially in the same condition as the time at which you collected it?
It's been processed, so it does appear a little bit different than original from the scene.
And when you say processed, what does that mean?
I examined it for fingerprint evidence.
Okay. And we'll talk about that more in detail. Your Honor, at this time we would ask that State's Exhibit number 10 be admitted into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion to introduce to evidence allowed.
Your Honor, at this time we would ask that Agent Louder be allowed to step down and publish to the jury.
You may do so. Everybody see it as much as you want to see it.
Point for me, if you will, when you collected this knife at the scene, what, if anything, you observed on it?
What appeared to be blood was located on the knife.
And we will get into this in a little bit more detail later on, but when you say processing, what types of things did you do in regards to the knife?
For this particular knife, I examined it for fingerprint evidence. I also examined it for possible blood. I also took a possible DNA swab off of it for possible touch DNA.
If you would, go ahead and tell us what touch DNA is.
When there's a theory in forensics, it's called Lockhart's theory. So whenever you are somewhere and you touch something, you leave behind a piece of you. Touch DNA is typically the epithelial cells that you leave behind when you've touched something.
And is there always DNA, touch DNA left on an item?
No, there's not. DNA is very fragile, so it doesn't stay forever.
And we'll talk about this some more, but is that true for fingerprints as well? Are fingerprints always left behind when someone touches an item?
No. DNA, along with fingerprints, there are various conditions that affect them, such as weather, temperature, how it's stored, the type of item that it is as well.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes, ma'am.
You would identify for us what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 11.
These are 10 prints of the deceased. Again, it has my CCBI case number, the Wake County case number. I have an unknown victim on this. The address is Old Bayleaf Road and Durham Road, where I collected it from, my name, and the Wake County officer's name, as well as it was sealed by me.
And if you would, go ahead and open that. And are those postmortem fingerprints in substantially the same condition on the date that you collected them there from the victim?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, we would ask that State's Exhibit number 11 be admitted into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion left.
We've talked a lot this morning about all that you did there at the scene in terms of photographing, documenting your observations and of the victim and of other evidence collected at the scene. Was there anything else that we've not covered, and was there another time that you were called out to the scene?
I wasn't called back out to the scene. I requested that the Sheriff's Department hold the scene till later that night. I did go back out to the scene that night at approximately 7 o'clock that night. The purpose of us going back to the scene that night was to look for any possible blood that we couldn't see with our naked eye. At that time, my supervisor was there, and I met a Sheriff's Department deputy who had secured the scene during the day. When we arrived on scene, we wanted to use a chemical that would light up during the night. It's called luminescence. And it's basically a chemical that's prepackaged that we just order, and we place it in a spray bottle along with a liquid mixture. We mix these tablets together in a spray bottle, and since it's dark, that's why we waited until nighttime. We sprayed an area near where the deceased was located to see if we could find any more blood near the road or in the grassy area that we had possibly missed.
And what did you find?
The only areas that fluoresced with this chemical were the areas where the deceased was located.
And when you say the areas where the deceased were located, could you be more specific about that?
Specifically near the ditch area, near the sign where he was located face down, and then where we had rolled him over.
And how large an area, or to how large an area did you apply this luminescence?
We applied it several feet in various directions.
And when you say several feet,
10 to 15 feet probably.
One of the things we've talked about was you using the postmortem fingerprints to identify the victim. Was there any identification with the victim? Did you find any wallet or any other kind of IDs with the victim?
No, when I examine the victim, I also palpitate his pockets with my hands to see if there's any identification or wallet in the pockets, and there was not any on scene.
Beyond the crime scene, you had significant involvement in this case in processing evidence. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
What was the next thing or next part of your duties as related to this particular homicide?
When I left the crime scene, I went back to CCBI facilities at 3301 Hammond Road to process the evidence that I had collected there on scene, including the knife.
And when you say process the evidence, let's talk in more detail now about what that process, how you do that.
Well, for various pieces of evidence, we look for different types of evidence. And in the knife, and for instance, I was looking for fingerprints, as well as touch DNA and possibly blood. The first thing I did was I noticed that there appeared to be possible blood on the knife. It was tested with phenolphthalein, as I've already described, and a positive reaction did occur on that. So I used a second swab to collect the blood from what appeared to be blood on the knife blade.
And for those of us who may not do this on a daily basis, when you say a positive reaction, how did you know there was a positive reaction?
After applying the phenolphthalein to the swab, it turned bright pink, which gave me an indication that it was a positive reaction.
And in collecting that suspected blood stain, tell us how you did that.
I took a second sterile swab, placed distilled water on it, and swabbed the suspected area to collect the blood onto the swab.
And once you collected that swab, what happened to it, or what did you do with it?
The swabs that I use are called captures, so they have a little, like a cap at the end of it, so I can seal up the swab so it can't get contaminated. That capture was closed. It was placed in an envelope and sealed with my initials.
And did you take more than one swab from the knife?
I did. I also swabbed the knife for what I had talked about earlier as touch DNA. I did that on the handle of the knife. It's a very similar process. I basically just used a sterile swab, placed distilled water on it again, and swabbed the suspected area where I might find touch DNA. Touch DNA is not visible by the naked eye, so I couldn't see whether or not there was DNA on it.
You know, if I may approach. Louder, if you could, identify what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 12.
Number 12 is an envelope containing one swab of suspected blood from the knife, which was item 6.
And how can you identify it as such?
As previously stated, CCBI case number, the Wake County case number, the date, the type of offense, the address, my name, the deputy's name, as well as the agency.
And if you could go ahead and open what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 12. And do you recognize that to be the swab taken from the knife blade?
Yes, I do.
And is it in substantially the same condition as at the time that you took it?
It appears to be that way.
You know, we'd ask that State's Exhibit number 12 be admitted into evidence.
Objection.
No objection, Your Honor.
Vote last.
Moving to State's Exhibit number 13, if you could please identify for us what that is.
It's an envelope containing one swab from inside the knife handle.
And you identify it as that because of the markings on the envelope.
That's correct.
If you would go ahead and open it, please. And do you recognize that to be the swab from the knife handle for touch DNA that you took
Yes, I do.
during the lab on June 16th?
Yes, I do.
Does it appear to be in substantially the same condition as the time in which you took it?
Yes, it does.
All right, this time the state would ask that state's exhibit number 12 be admitted into evidence.
Objection.
Sorry,
Nope.
number 13, excuse me.
Motion to addition evidence number 13 last.
I think you also mentioned, just for clarification, once you collect these swabs, I know we talked about this at the very beginning, what happens with them?
Once I've collected them, I place them in a brown envelope. Anything with DNA or blood, we typically package in paper. If we place it in plastic, there's a chance of the DNA molding or becoming contaminated, so it wouldn't be useful for further analysis. So it's always packaged in a paper envelope or a paper bag. After it's placed in the paper bag, it's sealed. I seal it with my initials. I then secured it in an evidence locker, my own evidence locker, and when the investigation was done, in order for it to be further analyzed, it would be submitted to the state lab.
What other processing of the knife did you do there in the lab?
I also examined the knife for latent evidence, which we call fingerprint evidence. The process that I did for this particular knife was I placed it in what we call a superglue chamber. And it's basically a box that is sealed, and I shut the door after placing superglue and water in there. So the water will heat up the superglue to where it fumes the entire chamber, and the superglue then adheres to any moisture left behind on the particular item that I've placed in there. The superglue fixes that moisture, which the moisture is left behind due to fingerprints. After it's done processing in the superglue chamber, I place black magnetic powder, which is typically to what you see on crime scene shows. It's the powder, and when you place a brush and you gently paint the item with this black powder. And in this case, I used black powder because the knife was red, so there was a color contrast between the two, so the black would help the fingerprint stick out. After placing powder on it, I noticed that there were several possible fingerprints on it, which were then collected. And the way that I do that is we use clear tape. It's similar to packaging tape. I cut off a piece of the tape from a roll, place it on the surface where the fingerprint has developed. I smooth the tape over the developed fingerprint and then take it off of the object and place it on a white card that's similar to a note card. On the back of that note card, I then draw a picture of where I took it from, as well as a description, and place the CCBI case number, my name, the type of crime, and the date on the back of it.
You mentioned putting this in a super glue chamber. Is there anything about the super glue that impacts the fingerprint itself?
It's once the super glue has heated, like I said, it sticks to the fingerprints, but it doesn't distort or change the fingerprints whatsoever.
You approach your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
If you would, Agent Louder, identify what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 14.
It is my item number 14, which contains latent cards 1 through 2. Again, I can tell that this is mine based off of my markings on the exterior of the envelope, as well as my signature on the back.
Just for clarification, can you, using the knife there, point to where these fingerprints were removed from, or this fingerprint lift card?
I believe they were on the knife, the red portion of the knife handle. If you guys can see that right in through there.
And if you would open that exhibit, remove its interior. Having opened exhibit number 14, do you recognize the items in there?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize them to be?
They're latent cards 1 and latent card number 2. On the back, I have written where I took the print from. I've drawn a picture. The case number is on there, the date, my initials, as well as the type of crime.
Your Honor, if I may approach.
Yes, ma'am.
We are marking lift card 1 as 14A, and lift card 2 is State's Exhibit 14B. Permission to publish those to the jury,
Yes, ma'am.
and you don't need to get down if you just
Go
want to
ahead and
hold up.
introduce them to evidence.
I'm sorry. Yes, Your Honor, we would ask that they be admitted into evidence.
14, 14A, 14B.
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion to introduce and testify.
You don't need to stand down if you just want to hold them.
The front is what I lifted off of the knife, and the back are just my drawings.
What happens to those once you obtain those lift cards?
They're placed in this latent envelope, or this is what we call a latent envelope. It's for fingerprint analysis. It's then sealed, and it's placed in a locker where the latent examiners at CCBI will come collect them, and they will do a further analysis on them.
We will be hearing from a latent examiner, but just roughly, generally, what are their responsibilities?
They take any type of fingerprint that we collect, whether it be on scene or in the lab, and they examine it.
Did you have opportunity that day, which was June 16th, to process any additional evidence in the lab?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
It was item number 4 and 5, which were the shoes. I just took overall photographs of those. And then also I processed Mr. Perez's shorts in the lab.
And had you collected those shorts from the scene?
I did. I collected those from the scene with the permission of the medical examiner.
Yes, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our morning recess at this point. During our morning recess period, it is your duty not to talk among yourselves about this case. It's your duty not to talk to the parties, the witnesses, or the lawyers about anything at all. It's your further duty not to talk to anyone else, to allow anyone else to talk with you, to say anything in your presence about this case. Don't do any individual research or investigation on your own about any issue touching on this trial. Stay away from your smartphone, and do not form or express an opinion about this case during this time. Ms. Hobbs, when you come back, they're going to put a little thing down there for your feet.
Thank you.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, while everyone else will remain seated, I'm going to excuse the 13 of you and ask you to return and assemble the jury room at 15 minutes to the hour of 12. Then we go by that clock.